Hey, it's Chris. So, end of 2022. Looking back across the year, what were my favorite crowdfunding campaigns looking back now? I've only started doing the look back immediate or the look back within the year in the last month or two, but we're going to look back all of 2022 and we're going to say what were the ones that stood out to me when I looked through that list of a couple hundred crowdfunding projects that I talked about, that I previewed in terms of what was upcoming and what was expected, and that I ran through in terms of the weekly roundups. Where were the ones that stood out for me when I went through that list again here at the end of the year, and why? Giving you some thoughts, giving you some comments, giving you some thoughts and reactions now that we've had a little bit of time to digest, whether that's a month or less or 11 months. Let's do this. First up here, we're going to go with the obvious. The biggest fundraiser of the year, fundraiser, right? Like, okay, you know what I'm talking about. Fundraiser, not fundraiser. But that is Marvel Zombies. It's the Marvel version of Zombicide. Almost $10 million. You can't argue with that. It took their most popular franchise. They slapped the IP of one of the most popular IPs out there, especially with the superhero craze going on still in the Marvel universe. And it smashed it out of the park. Now, the Giant Galactus, don't get it. Just like the Giant Cthulhu, we'll talk about that later. But I mean, it's something that is purely FOMO marketing, huge plastic that you're never going to utilize. So yeah, I mean, it got me. It got me. I can't lie. I backed it. I didn't get all the expansions or the all-in by any means. I think I got like 2 expansions. The early retail box from like the X-Men side of things, the small box of that, has not really been terribly well received. Like, people haven't been super happy with that. And so we'll see, because it reminds me a little bit of how they did Marvel United. But is it really going to stand up? Is it really going to make me want it? Or am I just going to sell it all? I'll be frank with you guys. I don't really know. Campaign was outstanding. Campaign is noteworthy, and it outlasted everything else the whole rest of the year. Hype be darned besides that. So that's why it has to occupy the number 1 slot here. I mean, again, you have $9 million, 29,000 backers. But for 29,000 backers, I mean, that's a big price point, because you'll see other campaigns that raised not anywhere near that amount with that amount of backers, with things like Oathsworn, or in that realm of things where there was a significant percentage of that. But this is why right here, right? $180 for Galactus, and then $50 per pop on each of these expansions, which were all not created equal in my opinion. So the problem just is with some of those, you can't tell the value, you can't tell the replayability, because when I think of that, I think of Marvel United's expansions as well. Like, some of those were just significantly better than others. They're more balanced, they're more fine-tuned, they're more difficult in terms of not providing too much of an easy route. And that's my fear with this, is that a couple of these just aren't going to be good from that aspect. And we saw a decent variety in Marvel United, but I think you saw even a little bit more discrepancy in Marvel United X-Men in terms of just the quality. I think it was better, but is it going to stand the test of time? And what else are you going to see from this in the future? Because if this raised $9 million, folks, you got to imagine that they're looking at that going, what else can we do with that to raise a bunch of cash to play off of it? You know what? Speaking of that, we'll just go straight over to the next one. Wasn't going to do it in this order, but since we're talking about playing off of a previous, and we're talking about CMON already, we're going to talk about Cthulhu Death May Die, Fear of the Unknown. I'll be frank, I never thought there would be another Cthulhu Death May Die. And I also didn't think that the second campaign would be anywhere near as good as the first. And I will argue that the first campaign, compared to the second campaign now, is inferior. I think the value, the amount of content for the price, because they didn't, for some reason, jack up the prices on this one. You get more content with the base pledge here. You can sell your original Unspeakable box and cover your whole pledge plus for the second one, even at this point, right? And the stretch goal box for the second campaign has more stuff than the Unspeakable box that people are clamoring for $250 or $300 for right now, before they also did something they usually haven't done before as well. And they offered something previously that was exclusive. They don't do that a ton. So there must have been some serious that they saw from that aspect of things. And again, they got me. I am a Cthulhu Death May Die lover. It's that and Marvel United X-Men as my top CMON games. So I have no qualms about saying that. But again, 3.4 million again with 21,000 people. So only 8,000 discrepancy, but triple, almost triple the funding raise. So that tells you how much the price point pledge difference average was when you're talking about that. And they're adding some cool new things here, which I think are going to take a notch up, just like Marvel United and Marvel United X-Men did. And so I have no qualms about saying that I think this is going to be better, just in the same way that X-Men was the upgrade for the Avengers version of Marvel United. Because let's be honest, that's kind of what it was. Do you need everything? No. Do you get all the expansions? No. Should you? Maybe, because you don't know if they're going to do a season 5 or 6. Maybe, because, now you never say never. But does it make you feel any better about things? I don't know. Am I going to try and sell some of my previous stuff? I might, because I'm not a completionist. I want the better stuff. I don't want the more stuff. So either way, give them kudos for making this better and sticking with it. Next up, we're going to talk about another one that now I think not only makes it more standoutish, but I think a lot of people are going to give it a heavier look-see with the latest success of their release that's going to backers currently, Into the Unknown's Kingdoms Forlorn. Now, my review of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, I think, should be out by now, but it's a freaking fantastic game. People are really, really pleased with this, and I am too. And I think with the success of that, now that people have seen, holy crap, this is what Into the Unknown is putting out, I think a lot of more people are going to be giving this one a look-see in terms of late pledging, if they can still. And, I mean, it didn't do gangbusters. Like, it wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be. It only raised just over $1 million, 6,000 backers. Again, price point, expansions, the question of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, of still not being delivered during the campaign. So, I mean, there were some good question marks, and people were overly cautious. But now, I think there's going to be some heavy second guessing in terms of, am I going to miss out here too? So, I mean, here you go, right? This is more of a medieval Tainted Grail-esque Aeon Trespass Odyssey in a different way. It's got more of the narrative vibe. Having played the prototype of this, having played a bunch of Aeon Trespass Odyssey now, this is more narrative for me speaking, and I actually prefer Aeon Trespass Odyssey. I know right now, based on what I saw originally, of course, because I think there's going to be a lot of changes from Kingdoms Forlorn, especially just the intro stuff that we saw based on the final copy. But that also makes me excited because it's going to get better is what it appears, because I think that's what Aeon Trespass Odyssey did, because Into the Unknown did a Madara where they said, you know what, we're not pressed to get this out. We're going to get it out when it's right, not when it's supposed to be out, which is going to frustrate people who want their game and want their game yesterday. But it ultimately leads to a better game, which ultimately is what you want, because a crappy game is a crappy game forever. I'm looking at you, Etherfields. Anyway, miniatures, fantastic. I've got a bunch of the Aeon Trespass Odyssey still sitting on the table here in front of me. So you can see just like this is one of the bosses in the cycle number 1 that you're going to fight. And this thing is just massive. Massivature. Not massivature, but you know what I'm saying. This is illuminatingly pretty. There's a lot of stuff going on, going back to the page here. There's a lot of upkeep and there's a lot of dice rolling, but it's not as close to KDM as Aeon Trespass Odyssey is. And I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. I'm saying that in a great way. I think they've improved a lot of things that was KDM's issues and some of its faults, because it's not a perfect game, even though people absolutely fantastically love it for the macabre niche boutique game that it is. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to go on here, and it's going to be a really interesting test of the market too, to see what they can improvise and improve upon in terms of the model that they've already, or the standard that they've already set. So that's why this one has to make some waves, especially now at the end of the year. Now, we're just going to stay with this theme before we get to some of the smaller projects, and not any lesser, but just the massive scope of things. And next up, we're going to talk about Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, because this was sort of an original trendsetter in terms of the narrative campaign style open world games. And Red Raven really, set the standard. A lot of people put this out as the best narrative campaign game out there. I haven't played the original, so I can't speak to that. But a lot of people really, really like it. And you saw that when the game page for Distant Skies launched. And it didn't get as much as I thought, $2 million. And a lot of that, or a good portion of that, was also people getting in on the original for a good price point. And part of it also was they didn't jack up the prices. I think you could have done a Frosthaven and significantly elevated the price, because I guarantee it's going to be more at retail like Frosthaven was. And it's like $90 for the gameplay. And you had the option when this launched to get a couple different pledges, all the new stuff, just the gameplay and the expansion that was going along with it, or all of the stuff. And so I give them a lot of kudos for separating that out again. And this strikes me as well as a Tainted Grail 2.0, a Kingdom Rush 2.0, a Cthulhu Death May I Die Marvel Avengers versus X-Men 2.0 version of Sleeping Gods, which again, like I said, is already well regarded. The price point was great, and I couldn't avoid it myself on this one either. Do I need it? No. Do I have too many of these? Yes. Will I play it eventually? Maybe. But that's why it's so intriguing that you said, I'm going to take one of the most well thought of campaign games and I'm going to try and make it better. The original theme didn't really do much for me. I really like this theme much, 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 much better. So that was the other reason I couldn't do it. Couldn't skip it. Yep, there you go. Now we're going to head over and start looking at some of the less expansive, less epic scrolling games, but no less quality, because these were the ones that also made me excited as well. The first up of this is Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, the expansions. Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition was a huge surprise for me. Huge. I didn't expect to like this game. I have never played and never have the desire to play Terraforming Mars. Will I play it eventually in my board gaming career? Absolutely. Will it happen in 2022? No chance. Will it happen in 2023? The 8-ball tells me that the answer is still out. So, this, though, was absolutely fantastic. I couldn't believe I like it. Am I good at it? No, I'm terrible at it. But I enjoy it nonetheless. And it's a game that is wide-reaching and easily explainable in the model of the Race for the Galaxy. And if I told you were going to have 3 modular expansions for this, and that would raise, again, nearly as much as Kingdoms Forlorn with $1 million almost at 914,000 with 12,000 backers, that's an overwhelming, smashing success. Is it partially the Terraforming Mars name and IP? Yeah. At the same time, this game is different enough that, and it's been out for long enough that you're seeing a divergence of the people who prefer one or the other. And it's not just a similar crowd who buys all the zombie sides, right? Or a similar crowd who buys all the Garfield games or buys all the Eagle Griffin Lacerda games, right? You're seeing a divergence because this is significantly different here in terms of what this campaign is and just what the game is as a whole. And I'll flat out say, I think this is a better deal with the little add-ons extra. There was some discrepancy. There've been some sales with the original Kickstarter version at some of the retail and getting it for that. You know what? It's $5 or $10 at most discrepancy. And if you're losing $5 or $10 on a game like this and not 30 or 50 or 70 on a bigger box game that I talked about earlier that maybe doesn't hold its value potentially on whether or not it's good or not, that's more of my concern rather than this. So do I need all 3 expansions? No. Am I looking at 1 or 2 of them over the third? Yes. Am I going to have all 3 though? Yes. And so then I get to see what I like and what I don't like, and that's okay. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it from that aspect. Do I need the promos? No, it was a nice little cherry and frosting on the top, if you will. So I'm happy with it. And it killed it. Card game, $1 million almost. So take that for where you will, but that's why it's really killing it. In similar light, games that I didn't know what they were going to do or bring or even have much awareness of previously. Next up is Ra. And if you missed my review of Ra, Ra was an eye-opening game for me. Sort of like Dune Imperium in the sense that, wow, how have I not played this? Wow, this is really awesome. These mechanics are great. And Ra's an old game and it's out of print, and I had never had a chance or even really come across it too much before 25th Century Games said, hey, do you want to try it out? And I was like, yeah. And the new aesthetic is absolutely beautiful. The wooden pieces are incredible. And they went over to Gamefound and they raised nearly $500,000. So that's not insignificant for an out-of-print Knizia game. One of, if not the most classic auction games that's out there that still stands up the test of time. My wife loved it. I loved it. Set collection, auction, bidding, little bit of press your luck as well. The only question is, do you need it for this price point? Because the deluxe edition is going to cost you $80. That's probably the biggest detriment to a few of these games that we're being selective about this. I heard the same thing about Debris when it went live as well this year when I talked about that one. The price point was higher in terms of deluxifications and what people wanted to play. And you know what? I'll say the same thing with both of these. If you want the standard edition and get it at retail, do it. It's absolutely worth it either way. However you choose to support the deluxifications, I leave to you. No judgment. We all have different preferences and orders of operations in terms of the deluxifications, but this is an absolutely fantastic game. They didn't do anything to screw it up. They didn't do anything to change it significantly. They just said, hey, this is a really awesome game. We're giving it an overhaul, a facelift, and a just better version overall, and they did it. So 25th Century Games killed it with this one. The other one that really raised almost about the same amount of money, just slightly lower, $450,000, was a departure for Chip Theory Games here with 20 Strong. And I say a departure because they had similar IPs that they had used previously with the Too Many Bones and that, but they also went a whole different direction because this is also a dice and card-based game where you're rolling 20 dice and allocating them to challenge cards that come up out of a random deck. And the concept seems rather lackluster, to be frank with you. But yet here I find myself backing for $65 to get all 3 decks because I'm hopeful that it will entice my children to play something like that with me, and it'll eventually branch out into the multiplayer. And I say that because right now this is a solo game, and you're going to have multiple decks, multiple universes, and it's going to be supported more at retail, they said, in the future. And $65 for all 3 decks, including free shipping, with a little extras as well. That's a price that's not going to be beat. It's just not. Chip Theory does that on purpose to support the consumers who are supporting them. And I give them a lot of kudos. And this campaign just showed why they're so well thought of. And the support that it got, $450,000, it was a lot more than even some of their other more well-known established IPs that they have done in crowdfunding in the last year or two. So $450,000 doesn't sound like a lot compared to a lot of these other things, but you have to remember, again, 20 dice and some cards, folks. 20 dice and some cards, $450,000. Whew. Howdy. That's why it's on the list. Now we're going to go over back to Gamefound here for a second. This is probably going to be the most divisive one on this list because I can't discount it. I can't ignore it. But this is Castles of Burgundy, the deluxe edition. Does Castles of Burgundy need a 3rd edition in the last, 3 years? No, it doesn't. Absolutely not. Totally and utterly superfluous deluxifications. But like I said, how do you like your deluxifications? Because if you like your deluxes, this one was the campaign for you from Awakened Realms. 2.9 freaking million euros. Similarly here, 22,000 people. For a miniaturized, deluxified game that you can pick up for $20 right now. You know where my preferences lie. At the same time, I've never played Castles of Burgundy. I think I may like Castles of Burgundy. But if I have to choose between paying $100 for this version and $20 for the 2019 version, with a few expansions thrown in there, I have a hard time doing it, as pretty and aesthetically pleasing as this game appears. And I always give Awakened Realms kudos because they give you a separate gameplay all-in and a separate deluxification all-in. And I love that. I love not being forced upon some of the extra deluxifications that are less appealing to me. So I give them kudos wherever I can in that sense, because that's not the case with a lot of other crowdfunding projects that I cover on a weekly basis. So that's not insignificant to me either. Do I need all this stuff? Do I need it sun-dropped? No, I really don't. But if you love this game and this is a top game for you, I can see why a lot of people went in on this. I have no qualms about it from that standpoint. If you're happy with it and you love it, you know what? I'm happy for you and you love it too. And that's why it made the list. I mean, at the same time, like I said, divisive because it's already got 2 editions out there. It already had a redo 3 years prior to this, and it didn't really need another one. And that's also a concerning trend to me as well of things on crowdfunding in general that we've seen, especially with Bezier Games, with a couple of their titles with Suburbia and Castles of the Mad King Ludwig, where you don't need another version of that, but here we are finding ourselves for a $250 version of it. And that's the concerning aspect, which is why it's so divisive when I talk about the love and the opposite for this at the same time. But it made the list for that reason as well. I got 2 more and then some bonus picks at the end here, some honorable mentions. This one is going to surprise a lot of people, but I think it really shows you put out a quality product, people will support you. And this is Aquamarine. Now, why am I talking about Aquamarine? You probably don't even know what company put out Aquamarine. If you can tell me in the comment section without cheating, I'm pausing this video right now. I'll give you a +1 bonus point. It's Postmark Games. Postmark Games, the same company that did December 2021 with Voyages, the incredibly smash hit Roll and Write. And this is no less impressive. They got 6,600 people and nearly $30,000 raised during the campaign for a print and play at home for $5 a piece. That's freaking fantastic. It goes to show you that these are just as important and just as desired in this hobby as some of the other stuff. I'm a proud backer of this. Voyages was a top 10 game for me from 2021. Top 10 campaign surprises. absolute one of the best values I've ever had on crowdfunding, and I don't know if I'll ever beat that. I don't know if Aquamarine will beat that. That's probably the other contender. But it's an underwater diving print and play roll and write at home that you just print off and color and laminate, and there you go. They give you 3 or 4 different maps. They support it on Discord. You've got people making their own as well, especially like they did with Voyages. And it's something different than what we've seen. You don't need the massive retail presence. You don't need the massive deluxified presence. You don't need the massive overhead in terms of storage. It's just awesome. And so I love seeing this. And I backed a couple of these this year, along with this one and Sunshine City as well, because I really like supporting these types of games. And they fit really well with terms of what I like and what the people around me like to play. So they deserve a significant shout out for killing it this year and for doing awesome. And I hope we see another campaign for them in the similar line of things in 2023 as well. Second to last year, we're going to go with Brotherwise. And I don't get everything from Brotherwise. I think they make a great solid product, but this one, Castles by the Sea, really caught me by surprise. It sort of was what I thought Catacomb Cubes from Elser Games was going to be, but you're building sandcastles out of wooden blocks. And you're leading your castle or your kingdom to victory over other people's while avoiding the threats that are going to come up on the beach in the first place in the sand. And if that theme and that incorporation doesn't make you smile, I don't know what's going to, right? Like, that's just kind of cool. It's just kind of neat. It's kind of cutesy, and it just works. And they got me with some of the deluxifications. They got me with the screen printed. And do I regret that a little bit? Sure. But it's one of those that I'm going to splurge for. I'm going to hope it's going to be like more of a bullet heart for me rather than something else, like a Meeples and Monsters, if you will. So that's why I was really enticed by it. I mean, it just looks awesome. A little bit of deluxifications, a little bit of exclusivity in terms of what you're getting here with these screen printed Meeples, like I said. And it just looks like, as Matthew Judd said here, it's my jam. That's the best way I can sum it up. This is a style of game in which I am absolutely going to thrive and flourish and enjoy. And it hits the sweet spot in terms of depth and complexity and length of play. And so Brotherwise was rewarded with this. They raised $137,000 with 2,500 people. And I think this is going to be one that really surprises people. And it's going to be in hot demand once people see what it looks like at the retail and in backers' hands. So it's going to fly under the radar in the meantime, but you heard it here first. So the last one up here, before we get to the honorable mentions, we're going to be talking about one that completely came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't expecting, I wasn't sure, but you know, like me, I like cooperative games. I like hard cooperative games. I like games in the pandemic style of things. And so this one, Daybreak, from the pandemic master, Matt Leacock, I couldn't ignore. And this one was over on Backerkit. This is probably the biggest success for me on Backerkit that I've seen. It raised nearly $500,000 with almost 9,000 people, despite a lack of significant incentives, because we haven't seen that yet with Backerkit as the biggest detriment so far in 2022. And it's pretty to look at. And it's Daybreak. You're trying to be environmentally conscious and clean things up and trying to make the world greener. And it does a great job of incorporating the theme into the mechanics. They gave a whole bunch of background during the updates of how they did the theme, how they balanced it out, how they incorporated it. And it was really just amazing to see. Is it going to be a better price point? I don't really know. There weren't a ton of stretch goals that really make you want to back it, but I'm going to risk it. This is going to be one of those on the list of the things I backed this year that, you know what, if I don't, get the best price for, I'm not going to, cry spilt milk over it either, right? I'm not going to lose, sleep over the fact that maybe someone's going to pick this up at retail for a very similar content and $20 less, right? Like, I'm happy with this. They're happy with this. You have to see where this is going and how this is good. And a harder style pandemic and a different vibe and different theme and different incorporations. I love this aspect of things. Completely and utterly enamored with it. And can't wait to see more of it. And it's just, when can I get my copy more than anything else? So there you go. Now, we're going to give you 2 quick honorable mentions, but it's really one, because it's the same overarching issue, the same overarching concern, the same overarching premise that we've seen. And that is video games coming to crowdfunding. I've been hyping this for the last 2 years on my channel. This is no different. We have Elden Ring, and then we have Slay the Spire, right? Both massive funders, both based on video games of undoubtedly, undoubtful, massive success, and coming to the tabletop scene. And the question is, do you really need either of them? Are they too close to the video games where there's going to be too much incorporation and too many parts and too many keeping track of things? Or is it just going to be a trend because these have done well, so we're going to see a lot more in the future? And I think it's especially the latter seems to be winning more than the former. And people are seeing it with, this in their eyes. 2023 is just going to be more of the same. It's more just a question of which of your nostalgic or which of your most reminiscent favored IPs are going to be heading this way as well, because we've seen some highs, we've seen some less than as super successful. Elden Ring here, again, Steamforged, 13,000, 3.3 million, $429 price point pledge. A lot of money for part of the game. That was my biggest concern. I think the gameplay looks mechanically solid, but I think the bigger test point is, when does Monster Hunter come out and what does it show how much Steamforged has improved in their gameplay? I think that's going to be the biggest test of the market. Just like Aeon Trespass Odyssey that I talked about earlier, improving and making people really, really satisfied is going to help Kingdoms Forlorn. Monster Hunter World is going to be that one for Elden Ring, potentially. Never going to argue the value. Kickstarter, crowdfunding, Steamforged always has higher prices at retail, so the value doesn't concern me. If the gameplay holds up and is at least a solid game, again, not worried about necessarily losing money from that aspect, so take that for what you will. And then Slay the Spire from contention, they waited and waited and waited, and they put it out when they were ready. And just like Aeon Trespass Odyssey, a good product is a good product forever. So 30,000 people, almost $4 million. Again, if you had said to me prior to both these campaigns, which one's going to get more money, I would have almost routinely said 90 times out of 100 that it's going to be Elden Ring. And here we are with Slay the Spire raising almost $750,000 more. So it just shows what I know sometimes in terms of what you expect on crowdfunding. And I think this looks awesome from a deck building cooperative standpoint. The question just is, just like with Elden Ring and a few of the other games that have come out recently, is, how many tokens, how many cards can you upkeep and keep track of before it becomes more of a hassle and more of a setup teardown issue than an enjoyment issue from that aspect? Because Slay the Spire, the video game, does it so well. Can it be replicated long term? If the Slay the Spire mechanics and the format of that, of playing these quick battles, having the back and forth and climbing the spire very quickly and getting in and out, dying and replaying, it can't be fully replicated and these battles turn into slogs, is it going to be as fun to get it repeatedly played onto the table or not? Cooperative aspect is really intriguing. I want to see how they can do that since it's only a solo game on the video game side of things, what that's going to entail and will it work as well? I'm guessing yes. But again, the basement is probably higher on this one than a lot of the other video game IPs we've seen. The ceiling is probably about as high as well. But I don't know. This is probably the only one that I would seriously consider late backing as well as a temptation from my personal taste. So that's it. Those are my campaigns, my top campaigns of 2022 looking back. For this, that, or the other. Not because I personally was the most invested in them, but because they made waves, they were interesting to talk about, they brought up interesting conversations, but also they're going to be either really intriguing games, really, really good games, or games that are going to be talked about heavily because of their impact on the industry as a whole. So all of those things factored in at the same time. So that's why my list is out there, and my list is always wrong. Tell me what I'm wrong about in the comment section. Tell me what games they should have been on this list as well that may have made your list. This was a tougher list to make. Now, again, there probably weren't, a 24 more games, but there were probably a good 4 or 5 other games I could have talked about easily that you could have swapped out a few in there with some of those that your opinion might vary on or be stronger on from that aspect. So tell me what you think in the comment section as well. What else stood out for you within the last 12 months? There you go. Liege, look back. Stay classy. Have a great day. See you around.